This is Rostra, the St. Theodore Guerin Junior Classical League podcast, where we bring the lessons of classical study into the light for the benefit of all.
Welcome back to another episode of Rostra. We've got a return guest with us, Stella Kolb. Stella has had some episodes with us before, and interesting topic. Let's just jump right into it. What is your topic?
I will be talking about how the Roman Empire influenced Christianity.
So interesting. We talk about the influence of Latin a lot, obviously the language on English and all this kind of thing. But there's also other cultural and historic influences as well. So you're specifically focusing on the Roman Empire and Christianity. Interesting, since Rome itself was polytheistic, lots of gods going on. So what in the world could possibly be the connection?
Well, obviously just how having all of the Roman roads helped spread Christianity. The architecture ended up being Catholic churches, and then how Christianity ended up becoming the official language, and how Latin is obviously the official language of the church still.
Okay, so let's start off with we'll walk through all of those, obviously. Let's start off talking about roads. Obviously, roads were hugely important for the army, right? So this was ultimately why Rome built so many roads. It was to march their troops various places. But once you've got the roads built, everything can travel. Goods and information and culture. And so talk to us maybe a little bit about how that really worked. What was the connection then between being able to move quickly through the empire and the spread of the Christian faith?
Well, the roads went all the way up from, England down to North Africa, which is just a way that the Christians could really get all over the place, but it also led to the Christians being captured easier too.
Kind of a double-edged sword, as it were, right? I mean, and Roman roads were dangerous. Regular travelers knew this. There were always people lying in wait, what we call highwaymen, to rob or to kidnap or these kinds of things. But obviously, Christianity has this big missionary motive, right? The idea is, you've got to get out, you've got to share your message. Obviously, roads are going to help that, whether you're walking, whether you're riding, whether you're traveling in some sort of a wheeled vehicle. That goes much faster. And as you said, roads spread really throughout the empire, if you think all the way from the north in England all the way then into North Africa. So you've got roads everywhere. That's good. Then you mentioned, though, something about architecture itself and connecting it with churches.
Yes.
So what's the connection there?
Well, when the professor came to Guerin Catholic, I thought that it was really interesting just how he talked about how some of the old places where court would happen actually ended up turning into Catholic churches, and that's how we built our Catholic churches for 1900 years.
Human beings are, on the whole, pretty clever about reusing things. Obviously recycling is a big thing. We talk about that today so much, but human beings have been doing this forever. Especially when, hey, I'm not using this wagon anymore, but I could use the wheel from it for something else, maybe some other type of vehicle or a machine. I take parts from one thing, use it in something else. Same thing with buildings. Not using this building anymore, let's either harvest the materials and build something else, or just use the building itself for a different purpose, a different function. And you're right, we had a guest speaker about that some time back here, talking about especially do you remember what building in particular, or what kind of building in particular, was really used then to become the model for churches?
Just the courthouse.
The courthouse, exactly right. Because a courthouse, it was designed to have a lot of people in it. It was designed to have, obviously you're trying cases, and so you got to be able to hear. It's designed for that. And people are like, hey, this is a perfect meeting spot. Anyhow, let's go ahead and start having our churches there. And so the basilica, which was the Roman courthouse, it becomes that kind of typical standard church architecture. So you see that everywhere. Still see it today. And then you mentioned something about Christianity becoming the official religion, but then also Latin and the official language. So kind of a two-parter in this last part that you mentioned here. How did Christianity become the main deal? Again, as I said at the beginning, Rome was polytheistic. Right? You got Jupiter and Juno and Venus and Apollo and all these gods and goddesses. How do you get from that to Christianity being the main faith?
Well, obviously Christians were persecuted for hundreds and hundreds of years, but then Constantine came along in 312 and issued the Edict of Milan, and his mother, St. Helen, allegedly found the true cross, and then just kind of went from there.
You know, it helps when the emperor says you're okay.
Yes.
When the emperor says, you guys are okay, and we're not going to kill you anymore. Mm-hmm. So obviously that was a huge boost, official recognition of the faith, not only obviously then to be practiced, but actually becomes the official faith, as you said. And then it makes sense if you think about it then, but obviously how did Latin then get rolled into all of this?
Okay, well, that kind of happened a little bit later when it really became official in the Latin Mass. That happened in the 300s, but it was still practiced throughout. At first it started Greek, and then it kind of happened to be Latin a little bit later.
As much as it saddens me to say this, Latin is not a spoken language these days, right? There's nobody who is born learning Latin as their native language, right? But back then, absolutely, right? This was the language of the empire. And by this point, as you're talking about the 300s and following, Latin has really supplanted Greek as the main language of the Mediterranean. Greek, using a point of reference from today, Greek was kind of the English of its day, right? You go anywhere in the world today, English is kind of a business language. People use it around the world. That was Greek. Well, then eventually that became Latin. Latin became that prime language. Obviously, with the faith becoming official, you've then got the use of that language. Now, interestingly, and I'm guessing you probably know this, what is the actual official language of the Roman Catholic Church today? Latin still, absolutely. So even though nobody's born speaking it as a native language, it is still the official language of the Roman Catholic Church. In fact, you can go on the Vatican website and you can find all the documents and so forth in various languages, including Latin. Yes. So overall, I kind of want to pull back. You talked about three areas of the roads. You talked about architecture. You talked about and of course, the becoming the official religion, and so forth. But let's kind of pull back and talk about this. Why would you think it might be helpful for a Christian to study Latin and Roman history? Now, obviously, a person who's practicing the Christian faith doesn't have to do that. A lot of people who've been Christians never spoke a word of Latin, right? Didn't know any of this. But why might it be helpful from your perspective as somebody who has studied Latin and Roman history? Why might that be helpful in the practice of the faith?
Well, I guess with that we can really kind of see where Christianity started from and how it was able to spread more effectively. I mean, in certain theology classes, we even study parts of Judaism just to really understand our background.
You know, it's said so many times, but I don't think it could be said enough. You really can't understand who you are now if you don't understand what led up to where you are now. Right? You've got to study the past. You've got to have some knowledge of that. Judaism, obviously, foundations of Christianity. Jesus was Jewish. And so same thing then as from what you just laid out there. Anything that you think that you want listeners to really, you want to make sure you say in this episode, you're like, hey, folks, you got to know this about the connection between Latin or Rome and the Christian faith?
I don't think so. I think we pretty much
Think pretty well covered the deal. I think you've done a great job, and if I may say, I think you have covered all the roads of Rome. So,
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you for listening to Rostra. You may check out all our episodes on Spotify and follow us on social media at GarinJCL. That's at GuerinJCL.